Let's remove that one right now because we did not do as much with that as I would have wanted. So War Powers Resolution is out, and I think the others are all good. What questions do you have about Chapter 2 terms? Because just by looking at this, this is the big one. Go ahead, Alvin.
Amendment fractions.
Amendment fractions. Let's just deal with fractions in general. We've dealt with probably 5 or 6 different fractions during the course of the class so far. Can anybody give me some examples of some fractions and what they mean?
3/5.
What's 3/5?
It's where back before Civil War, a slave was 3/5 of a person.
A slave was considered 3/5 of a person for representation and taxation purposes. Absolutely. 5 slaves equals 3 people. A slave is somehow less than a human. What other fractions did we have? What was 3/4?
Was this about pass? No, I don't know.
It was about passing. Passing what?
Wasn't it overriding a veto?
No. 2/3 was the way to override a veto. 3/4 was the ratifying what? Ratifying a constitutional amendment. What does it take to propose a constitutional amendment? 2/3 vote of the House and the Senate. 2/3 to propose, 3/4 to ratify. What was 9/13?
No, wait.
Excuse me. Go ahead, Abraham.
Out of the original 13 states, after they stopped making it requiring it to be a unanimous decision, they needed it to be 9 states out of the 13.
9 states out of the 13 specifically for what?
Pass the Constitution.
To pass the Constitution. Ultimately, all 13 did, but it had to be 9/13, and they did that because they knew they had 9, and they were less certain about the other 4. What was 13/13?
To pass anything under Articles.
To pass any law under the Articles of Confederation, it had to be unanimous. 2/3, 2/3, 3/5, 3/4, 9/13, and 13/13 are the fractions. Make sure you're good with those. Go ahead, Slippin.
And now it was 2/3 of the House and the Senate, but 3/4 out of those 2/3?
3/4 of the states to ratify. So you need 38 of the 50 states. 38 of the 50 states. Any other questions up here? Fire away. Go ahead, Manuel.
Will you say it again, the 3/4?
3/4 to ratify a constitutional amendment. Go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, 2/3.
2/3 is to propose a constitutional amendment or to override a presidential veto. Give me something new. Yes, Sigdig. What's that?
1313?
Unanimous to pass the articles, a law under the Articles of Confederation. Any others from the chart? Yes, Michael.
Stare decisis.
Stare decisis. What was stare decisis? What does it literally mean in Latin? Go ahead, Lamont.
Let the decision stand.
Let the decision stand. And I believe I gave you 2 examples of stare decisis, right? What were they?
It was the one with Reagan and the abortion.
What about Reagan and the abortion?
It's basically, he wanted to... Actually, never mind.
Okay, anybody? Yes.
It was like the longer that a law has been into place is the harder it gets to get
Yeah, it was, and it did deal with abortion. Reagan basically said, I can't amend the Constitution to make abortion illegal, but what I can do is appoint enough conservative justices to the court so that they'll simply change it. Reagan and Bush Daddy in their 12 years appointed 7 conservative justices. They had a majority 7-2, but they never overturned abortion. Why? Stare decisis. It means that if you have case law on the books and then similar cases are coming up the courts, you're supposed to use the existing precedents to decide them. And under stare decisis, the longer a decision is good law, the less likely it's ever going to be overturned. The Republicans never got it when they had 7 of the 9, and now we're 20 years later, they're not going to be overturning abortion anytime soon. What were the flag salute cases? Go ahead, Abraham.
So at first they passed something to make you had to like pledge allegiance to the flag, and then because some kids.
Who objected?
These little kids.
Jehovah's Witness kids. The Jehovah's Witness kids. And they were in West Virginia.
Yeah.
So basically, they were arguing First Amendment freedom, right? What was the school saying?
The school said that it was like it made you what's
patriotic.
yeah, patriotic.
The school was saying, we want to teach basic values, patriotism, loyalty, these kinds of things, respect for the flag, and we want you to stand. The kids said, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we cannot pledge allegiance to worldly bodies. So this is a violation of our First Amendment. When it first went to the Supreme Court, what did they hold? Go ahead.
That it was
It was legal. They said basically that the school was not engaging in religion, but we're in the middle of the Cold War. We're trying to raise good patriotic citizens, blah, blah, blah. Did the kids stand for the flag?
No.
What happened to them?
They got beaten and
Tarred, feathered, one castrated.
They got beaten. They got tarred and feathered. They got castrated. This is in West Virginia, and these are little freaking kids. Little kids, mind you. So what happened on Flag Day the very next year?
they killed it.
They overturned it. Remember, with stare decisis, the longer a case is good law, the less likely it is to be overturned. Abortion is still good law, and it's not going to be overturned. They got the flag salute cases within a year. That's why they got it. Go ahead, Alvin. What questions?
Full faith and credit clause.
What was the full faith and credit clause? This is from both, really, chapter 2 and 3. I gave you 3 examples of full faith and credit. Go ahead, Michael.
Wasn't it that any kind of document you get in one state would be upheld in the other states?
Full faith and credit clause says that if you get a binding legal document, a valid legal document from one state, it will be given the full faith and credit in all of the states. And the examples that I had given you were a driver's license. You can drive in any of the 50 states as long as you got a valid one. A criminal situation. If you are running from the law, a fugitive of justice, if you've broken out of jail, or if in fact you broke and ran away when you're wanted in another state, you will be extradited back to the state that you're wanted if you're caught. But the tricky one was marriage. What about marriage?
That gay marriage is only accepted like in some states, but when you move out of that state, it's no longer accepted when it actually should be because of this.
Yeah, if you get married to your boyfriend, and in fact, that you've broken up with several times, if you get married to the boyfriend that you've broken up with several times, and in fact, you move to Hawaii, you're still married, or you move to Montana, you're still married, or if you move to Oklahoma, you're still married. If Adam and Steve get married in a state that recognizes gay marriage and they move, they're not. And the argument would be under full faith and credit, it sure seems like this should be recognized, but at this point, even though that's in the Constitution, it is not recognized. Any others from up here? Go ahead, Emma.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse Rock. There were 2 of these. The 2 Schoolhouse Rocks were dealing with the preamble, and they were dealing with fireworks, and both of them are in here. If you remember these, the preamble basically just ran through the pieces of the preamble. What is significant about the preamble in the Constitution? Go ahead, Lamont.
Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Oh my goodness, is that in
We
the
the people.
preamble?
We the people.
We the people is how the preamble starts. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness comes from the Declaration of Independence. So make sure that you're clear on that distinction. But what was significant about the preamble? Not the Schoolhouse Rock, but just that part of the Constitution. Go ahead.
That is the basis of what the Constitution is in the war.
It's the introduction to the Constitution. It introduces principles, but you cannot sue. It has no legal significance. You cannot sue based on the preamble. No legal significance. With fireworks, it was basically just running through, if you remember, the beginnings to the Revolution, or more specifically, the Declaration of Independence. So it's got the words to the preamble in one. It's got the words to the Declaration in the other one. Maybe watch it once and make sure you're clear, or you can just find it in the book. I know y'all like to do that. Go ahead, Michael.
So, I'm sorry, just the preamble, so the thing we just have to know is that it doesn't mean anything.
It's the introduction to the Constitution, and it has no legal significance. You cannot sue because domestic tranquility has been violated. Yeah. Go ahead, Tomas.
1808.
What was 1808? We talked about the 3/5 compromise as being an example of slavery. How did 1808 deal with slavery?
That's how they dealt with compromise, because there was the New Jersey plan and Virginia.
Yeah.
And Virginia wanted
Slaves?
they wanted slaves to be counted as a full person because
Yeah.
it am I getting the states right?
No.
No, I know I'm not.
No. Go ahead, Abraham.
Was 1808 the time that they started trying to like ban slavery?
Did they try and ban slavery or something else?
No, it was like
Oh, I know.
international slave
The
trade.
international slave trade.
But was 1808 the year it started, or the year
Year it
after the
ended.
10th?
The year that it would start. So the idea is that they gave them 20 years from 1789 until 1808. And they basically said, the 1808 compromise, you can trade for 20 years. But starting in 1808, the international slave trade is banned. And their argument was, if we ban the slave trade, then we're going to ban slavery. And everybody's existing slaves are eventually going to die off, and slavery will go away. What did those crafty Southerners do?
They misused it.
They imported way
20
more.
years.
They began to breed their own slaves. So they didn't need international slave trade anymore. And in fact, instead of ending slavery, it dug its roots deeper in the country. What else do you have? Go ahead, Emma. Balancing. We were talking about ways to interpret the Constitution, and we talked about original intent. We talked about stare decisis, and then we talked about balancing, and the idea, if you remember, that you're going to try and balance competing rights. Do you remember the example that I gave you with vomit?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead, Slippin. What was the example with vomit?
Basically,
What's the clock say?
there was some.
10.
Okay. Basically, there was some guy who suspected him of weed possession. They
Morphine.
Morphine. All right, fine. They went to his house.
Yeah. Did they have a warrant?
Broke down the door.
They broke down the door, or was it slightly ajar?
Really? Oh, I have no idea. I don't remember.
It was slightly ajar, and they
ajar.
announced with a warrant in their hand saying that they had a legal warrant to go in the place and search for morphine.
Okay.
What happened?
They went inside, saw him pop something in his mouth.
He leapt
they
from the
did
bed
not-
as they entered the bedroom. He grabbed something off of the nightstand,
swallowed it.
and he swallowed it right in front of them.
They had no idea what it was.
But what did they think it
But
was?
they thought it was the morphine.
So what did the cops do?
What did they do? They took him to the hospital and it ended up pumping his stomach.
Yes.
But
And what did they find?
they found the morphine.
They found the very
But
morphine, so he was charged.
They did not say they were doing it for his own safety. They said they were doing it to find the evidence, and that's where they got it.
Understand on this. Can you pump somebody's stomach under the balancing part? You're talking about the idea of an unreasonable search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment, and then you're also talking about the idea of getting these drug pushers, morphine pushers off the street. And in this instance, you're balancing between that right to a fair trial versus this unreasonable search and seizure. Court took a look at this and they said, you cannot pump somebody's stomach unless you're in the interest of saving his or her life. The police said that they were attempting to save what? The evidence. And Justice Felix Frankfurter said, this shocks my conscience. How can you forcibly extract a man from his home in the middle of the night, take him to the hospital, make him vomit against his will, and then fish through that very vomit to find evidence? He said, that's not law at all. And they overturned this. That's why now the police are going to have a clear idea of saving your life before they invade your body. And if you remember, I think I had also given you the fingernail example as well, right? Emma, what was that fingernail example?
If you murder your boyfriend and...
You might want to zoom in on this. Okay, if you murder your boyfriend, go ahead.
And the police are trying to find out what happened, and since you were the guy's girlfriend, they want to talk to you about it.
Right.
And so, not suspecting you, just to ask you some questions. So they invite you to the police station.
Yes.
And question you, and they see like you have blood on your finger.
You have something red on your finger that could be blood. What did the police do in this instance?
They asked, like, can we look at your finger?
And what did this woman do?
You, like, wipe it off in your pockets. Right.
Probably shouldn't do this on camera. Go ahead.
And so
What did they do when she started to rub it off, destroy the evidence right in front of them?
they grabbed her and like held her down
And?
looked at her finger.
And extracted blood, which was her dead boyfriend's blood, and they attempted to use it against her and charge her with murder.
Right.
Was it a valid search? Was it valid to use this evidence?
Yes, because
Why?
of external evidence.
Yeah, the difference between pumping the stomach is that that's internal, and you're violating a person's person, and you can't do that. When you went into the police station, they didn't read her rights, they didn't have any kind of a warrant, which makes it different than the other example, but she, number one, was just in front of them destroying evidence. She was invited there, they weren't questioning her, she wasn't a suspect, she had not been held.